Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome into the Wednesday primetime edition of the Baseline View. This is where we pregame Missouri basketball. Mizzou tonight at Ole Miss in Oxford, 8 o'clock on the SEC Network. Who knows? Maybe you'll even be able to see the beginning of it because despite television networks showing college basketball games for 40 some odd years now, they seem not to really know that games tend to last longer than 2 hours. So whatever game is on the SEC network right now, I'm not sure what that is. Hopefully, for your sake, it will be over. And you will see the beginning of Mizzou and Ole Miss at 8 o'clock, which is 58 minutes from now. Here on the Baseline View, we are going to lead you right up to that. We will let you guys hear from Jeremiah Tillman. We'll get a little preview of Ole Miss, talking to my friend Neil McCready. We'll check in with Mitchell Forty a few minutes before tip-off. And we'll take your questions and comments and all of that leading up to the tip in a little bit under an hour. Missouri coming off a win over Alabama. Ole Miss coming off a week in which it beat both Tennessee and Auburn. So two teams right now headed in the right direction. Mizzou 13-3, Ole Miss 10-8 in the league. Mizzou is 6-3. The Rebels are 5-6. So Ole Miss, and we'll talk about this with Neil in a little bit, finds itself in a situation where it could play itself into the NCAA tournament over the next 3 weeks. To do that, it's probably going to need to beat Missouri at least once, if not twice. Missouri, meanwhile, is almost certainly in the NCAA tournament, unless just everything fell apart and the wheels came off. And we will deal with that situation down the road if it arises. But hopefully for everyone here, it will not. So want to invite you to do a couple things before we really get going here and getting into this matchup. First off, hit the like button on the show. That helps us out. I've been doing this for, I guess we started in August. It's the middle of February, so we've been going about 6 months now on this channel, and I still don't really know why hitting the like button and giving positive comments and reviews helps spread the word, but it does, so please do that. So if you're here watching, just wherever the like button pops up on your screen, hit that. It helps us out. Helps us be able to reach more people, do more things with this channel going forward and all that. The second thing is, in the chat section, in the comments section, please feel free to be part of the show. We will put your comments, your questions up on the screen. We'll talk about what you guys want to talk about. We always want you to lead the show. We generally get a number of kind of repeat viewers here. We have a lot of the same people watching shows, but if you're new, feel free to jump in the comments, be the first one tonight. Make sure to, whatever you guys want to talk about, that's what we want to talk about. It makes it much better than me just talking about whatever I feel like for 45 minutes or however long we're going to fill until tip-off. So what I'm actually going to do is first comment or question, and make it a real thing. Don't just say, hi, I'm first. But first comment or question about this game, about Mizzou basketball. I'm going to hook you up with a free month over at powermizzou.com. So let's get rolling with the comments. If you email me at powermizzou.com, there you go, Cam Cameron. You email me at powermizzou@gmail.com, Cam, and I will hook you up with a free month on the site for getting us rolling tonight. And as promised, look, we put these things on the screen, right? We can even adjust the size. And whoa, I didn't really mean to make it quite that big. So anyway, Cam asked the injury report earlier saying Romello White, undisclosed, will play. Seems kind of nonsensical. Why even include him in the injury report? That's a great question, Cam. I don't know what his injury is. He scored 30 points in Ole Miss's last game against Auburn. I didn't know he was hurt until I saw that tweet from John Rothstein. So whatever his injury is, it's not going to prevent him from playing. Mohamed C is not going to play for Ole Miss. He is Ole Miss's biggest player, and he's going to face he would theoretically face Jeremiah Tillman. He is not playing tonight, so Ole Miss doesn't have anybody over 6'8". could be an interesting night for Tillman, which leads to Carly's question. How is he going to play tonight? So this is a game that Jeremiah Tillman could be pretty big in, right? They don't have the size to match him. Now, what Ole Miss does, they play a lot of zone. Kermit Davis will throw many different defenses at Missouri throughout the game. That's what he does. It's kind of what he's known for. Is he's a defensive coach. They beat Tennessee, I think it was 52-50 a week ago. Kermit's going to throw a lot of different looks at Missouri, kind of try to confuse them. They're going to have to adjust. So it'll be interesting to see how Missouri does with getting that ball to Tillman in the zone. I think you could see some Mitchell Smith and Kobe Brown at the high post. It'll be interesting to see how Missouri handles it. But I think this is a game with Muhammad C. out that Jeremiah Tillman could be a pretty – I shouldn't say could be a big factor. He's a big factor in every Missouri game. But he could have a pretty good night. If he does, I think Missouri wins this game. Excuse me, I'm a little stuffed up today. I'm fine. No COVID, nothing like that. Just a little stuffed up. So Ryan Owens says, haven't kept up as well as I'd like. What's been the impetus for Ole Miss flipping the switch lately? And, you know, and you guys will hear this when we talked when I play the interview with Neil later. They've been incredibly inconsistent. Like before the season, I can't remember what the preseason poll was, but most people thought before the season Ole Miss was an NCAA tournament team. They're led by Devontae Shuler, and you know they've Romello White. They've got experience. Most people thought they were going to be playing in the tournament, and they just started out, especially in SEC play, really badly. I think they were 0-4 in SEC play. Could be 0-3. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they started off really poorly and now have played much better of late. I think mostly it's that they're playing better defense. Devontae Shuler, again, is their guy. He's the leading scorer. He's the guy that they look to. He needs to play well if they're going to beat Missouri. But he and Romello White are kind of their lead guys. And then beyond that, they have some guys that just some days they've showed up and some days they haven't. And I know this is an incredibly simple explanation, but when a lot of your guys don't show up, you're going to play poorly. When those same guys show up, you're going to probably play pretty well. Ole Miss just hasn't been able to do things consistently throughout this season, and that's been their biggest thing. Carly wants to know why Ole Miss is favored by 1.5. I think it's a few things. First of all, Ole Miss has been playing better lately. I think the lines are still accounting for home court, which I'm not sure they should because I'm not sure home court advantage really exists this year. I haven't looked at home and road records, but just with no fans, I mean, there's going to be 900 people in the pavilion in Oxford tonight. It's not really going to be that big an advantage. So I think that's part of it. And you got to remember, lines are set on lines aren't necessarily set on here's who we think is going to win and by how many points. Lines are set on the idea of where can we set it that we will get 50% of the people to bet on one side and 50% of the people to bet on the other side. So I think what you're probably seeing is like the reaction is the wrong team's favor, which would lead me to believe more money will come in on Missouri. But look, they don't set lines by being stupid. I would think Missouri by 1.5 would be the line that would make more sense to me personally. But I don't set lines. I don't do that thing in Vegas. So, look, they're smarter than I am. I've always said I have not gambled on a sporting event in 23 years. The last sporting event I gambled on was Ron Dane played in the Rose Bowl for Wisconsin. And the reason is very simple. They don't build those buildings in Vegas with all the flashy lights because they're usually wrong. And they usually lose money. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's a game Missouri could lose. Missouri should probably theoretically win, but like this is a close game. It's a tough matchup. So a lot of the talk early has been here from you guys has been Jeremiah Tillman. So what we're going to do real quick, we're going to play you Jeremiah's interview from yesterday. So about 5 minutes talking to Missouri's big man. We'll let you hear from him. Then we'll come back and get back more into the comments and questions.
About the matchup with Ole Miss, is it a game, we won't like to use the word trap game, after all these wins you guys have had, but how important do you think it is to play well in this one on the road?
I think it's important because we just came off a big win against Alabama. So the Ole Miss a real crafty team. They play very hard, and I feel like this would be a good challenge for us.
Ben Arnett.
Jeremiah, when you guys face some of these momentum swings where, you've got a lead, the other team grabs the momentum and they start kind of playing, running downhill against you. What's the message within the group as you learn to deal with that and sort of hold off or flip the momentum back to your side?
Those things we talk about all the time because it happens so often. So it's like whenever we see ourselves going back down and, like you said, they on a run and we not scoring. I mean, it's best to just get in a huddle during a timeout or something like that, or even like on a dead ball to just recognize what's going on and just, try to switch it and turn it over so we can have the upper hand again.
Gabe Yarman.
Jeremiah, after Saturday's game, I think Coach said in those last 6 minutes, you lost a little bit of aggressiveness. Can you tell us a little more about like what he said to you and what you saw on film watching those last few minutes?
I mean, just playing the whole 40 minutes. That's the biggest thing for real. Don't take any plays off. Can't see that you up and stuff like that and want to get lackadaisical. I'm not saying that I did, but I mean, I just feel like he basically means just playing a whole 40 minutes. So when situations like that, when we down or up by one in the last minute of the game, it wouldn't affect us so hard.
Jessica.
Hey, just with how you guys were ranked in the preseason for the SEC, do you feel like you guys went out to the court and just had something to prove, or did you have a chip on your shoulder this season? And do you feel like you are exceeding expectations, or are you kind of on par with what you expected from yourself?
Yeah, we definitely went out there with a chip on our shoulder and felt like we had something to prove, and we feel like we still do to begin with. But I mean, I feel like that's just every team's mindset when you feel like you play somewhere that you shouldn't be. So that makes just everything like it's more harder if that makes sense. Like far practice competing with each other, very aggressive, and when it comes to the court, just making sure that we let our name be known in a good way.
Dave Matter.
Jeremiah, your coach is really committed to playing faster this year. As a big man, how does that impact your game, and just how have you had to adapt or adjust?
I mean, I feel like that's part of my game too, because I like to run the floor, and I feel like I get a lot of easy buckets that way. Just trying to beat the point guard down the court. I know they're gonna look for me. So long as I'm running the floor, I either get other players open and or I get the ball. So I mean, I feel like it helps like all around, like 1 through 5.
Colin.
Yeah, Jeremiah, I'm sure Javon really wanted to play in that game Saturday. Just what did you see from him on the bench? And, even though he couldn't go, just his attitude around you guys.
He had a lot of excitement. He wasn't like down or nothing on the bench. He was still encouraging us on, and he still wanted to play, even though coach told him he couldn't. He was trying to make it seem like he was okay, but everybody was just telling him like to sit down, like you don't want to risk hurting yourself. So that's how much it means to him. He was still trying to play, even though he couldn't play.
Ben Arnett.
Hey, Jeremiah, Coach Mann just said he thinks Cuonzo Martin is the coach of the year in all of college basketball for the job he's done this year. In your opinion, Cuonzo Martin, coach of the year?
Yes, sir. I 100% agree.
And why is that? What has he done this year?
I mean, we have trusted him and everything he said, like far as just from the beginning that I've got here or the beginning of this season, like it's all just like slowly showing like the stuff that he preaches in practice, like before practice, like he has those little sayings he'll say, and far as just like the lights that come on this time. I mean, it all makes sense to us, but at the moment we don't realize what's like, we don't understand what he mean by it until like later on in the season, like, oh, this is what Coach Martin like was talking about. So us trusting him, I feel like that just means a lot because we trusted him and he doing everything he trying in his best to to provide for us on and off the court. So I feel like he's done a great job with us this year, and it's really showing. So I feel like why shouldn't he get it?
All right, so we talked about that last night on the 573 report, whether Konzo Martin is the SEC Coach of the Year. And we kind of came down. Mitchell 40, who we'll bring in again later on in the show, said, yeah, probably he would go with Konzo. I said probably as of today I would go with Nate Oates from Alabama. Konzo certainly has the ability to earn that award. Tonight would go a long way toward that because we know Missouri has 6 games left in the regular season, right? There's 7 games left in the regular season. They might have 2 more. We don't yet know what's going to happen with LSU and Vandy, but we know they've got 7 games. The next 6, the 5 after this, they're going to be favored. So this is the toughest game Missouri has, theoretically. And look, weird things happen. It's college basketball, right? But this is theoretically the toughest game Missouri has until the regular season finale against Florida, coming up in 6 games from now, whenever that is. I don't know, 3.5 weeks. So I think a win tonight, he goes on a run. Hey, if this team ends up 13-4 or 12-4, 14-4, somewhere in there in the league, yeah, Konzo Martin's got a great shot to win that. I would probably vote for Nate Oates today, but Konzo's in the discussion. There's nothing to apologize for right there. Josh Capron is asking what matchup I'm most interested in tonight. And again, Ole Miss, you're going to see a lot of zone tonight, so I don't know that it's going to be a lot of one-on-one stuff. I'm more interested to see on the defensive end for Missouri who Konzo puts on Devontae Shuler. My guess is Drew Smith, but Drew is a guy that tends to pick up some fouls sometimes when he's guarding the best player on the other team. So I wonder if maybe you'll get a little more Pinson on him to keep Drew Smith on the floor, maybe some Mark Smith at times. I know Konzo really likes his defense. But that's the matchup I'm interested in is Devontae Shuler on the offensive end and what Missouri does with him. And Cam brings up a good point. He says Devontae Shuler is a guy that feels like he's been in school for 7 years. Yeah, I've said a lot this year. I bet opponents feel that way about Jeremiah Tillman. Like, they have to think that dude has been here since like Lawrence Bowers was in school, right? Like 2013. I mean, it has to seem to Missouri opponents like he has been here absolutely forever. Jared, glad I don't gamble because I'd be thinking about hammering the 2.5. Yeah, like on the surface, it seems like a line that's asking you to bet on Missouri, but again, they don't build the buildings by being wrong, right? They tend to get it a little bit more than we do. Yeah. T-Rise says, can you imagine if Tillman answered that he thought Nate Oates should be the coach of the year, right? I mean, when you ask that question, hey, do you think your coach should be the coach of the year? What are they going to say? I mean, we could ask Vanderbilt players, hey, do you think Jerry Stackhouse should be the coach of the year? No, man, we're terrible. He should not be the coach of the year. He's done a bad job. Nobody says that. So, yeah, asking the Missouri players, hey, should Konzo be the coach of the year? I mean, obviously, they're going to say what they're going to say. Now, Konzo does have a legitimate argument for it. I'm in no way arguing against him for it. But when asked that question, yeah, I don't know what else Jeremiah Tillman is going to say other than, of course, my coach should be the coach of the year. He's done the best job in the league. He's amazing, and we love him, right? That's what you say. Real quick before we talk to Neil McCready in a couple minutes, I want to run through what else is going on in the league. We've got the scores rolling across the bottom. Alabama beat South Carolina last night. It was a close game. Bama hung on 1 by 3, hit a couple free throws with 2.5 seconds left, I think. But Alabama's got a real similar schedule to Missouri. And it's why I said on the postgame show, I still don't think Missouri has much of a chance to catch Alabama in the standings because Alabama is going to be favored to win out in the regular season. I mean, their toughest game is probably at Arkansas. After that, I don't know, I guess it's at Mississippi State is the second toughest game. So Alabama's probably going to go ahead and win out or come close to it. I don't see them losing more than once, maybe twice. Arkansas beat Kentucky 81-80. Kentucky is just, they're 5-13. It's insane. They're in every game, and they just managed to find a way to lose every last one of them. It is, it's unreal. The Kentucky collapses this year have been, and look, it's kind of enjoyable, right? The team that's always on top, you like to see not be on top, but it's been crazy how they've fallen apart. Auburn beat Vandy last night. Had to come back in the second half. Auburn is, they're playing out the string at this point. Can't play in the SEC tournament. Vanderbilt's just bad. Georgia's at Tennessee tonight. Saw a note on Twitter that Eve Pons is not going to play in that game, so could be a little bit interesting. LSU's at Mississippi State. That's one of those games, kind of like Missouri has tonight, where it's one of those top 6 teams in the league, which seems to have separated, but you go on the road to a team that is capable of beating you, and we'll see what happens. I think we basically got 6 teams for 4 spots. Well, we've really got 5 teams for 3 spots because Alabama's going to get a first-round bye. But we've got Missouri, LSU, Florida, Arkansas, and Tennessee. 3 of those teams are going to finish in the top 4 and get a double bye in the league tournament. 2 of them aren't. Missouri at Ole Miss could have something to say about that tonight. LSU at Mississippi State could certainly have something to say about that tonight. And real quick, one more question from Cam asking about the LSU and Vandy games. If they're going to make it up, it's going to happen after Florida, in the days between the Florida game and the start of the SEC tournament. I can't remember exactly how many days the SEC has set aside. It's like a 3 or 4 day window, 4 or 5 day window, something like that, where you can make up games. So Missouri could theoretically make up those games. They could even do it in Nashville before the SEC tournament. I've heard some talk of that. But if it's going to happen, it will happen after the Florida game and the end of the regular season. But again, tonight is at Oxford or at Ole Miss in Oxford, and always on this show we give you guys kind of some insight into the opposing team from someone who knows more about them than I do. In this case, that is my friend Neil McCready, and so I'm going to let you guys hear from Neil, get a little information about Ole Miss. We talked a little about SEC basketball, just a little bit about everything, because that tends to be what happens when Neil and I talk. All right, now we talk to Neil McCready, who covers Ole Miss for the Rivals Network. You probably know him better from the Greatest Pod in the South and his many non-sports endeavors, which we can talk about that, Neil. I don't know. Sure. I mean, if you want to talk about basketball, we will. I had Jay Tate on the show a couple weeks ago, and we mentioned there was a basketball game. I don't know if we got into it any deeper than that, but.
I've been accused of doing that throughout this season, covering the basketball team, because it's like for 1 week they lose a couple of games and I literally have subscribers saying don't cover it anymore, just don't cover it anymore, and you're like, well, I can't do that, but you do kind of back off a little bit at that point. Then they win a couple of games and it's like, where's the coverage?
Right.
And then they lose a couple of games and it's like, I told you to stop covering it, and now they've won a couple of games, and so we're on the other side of the seesaw.
At least yours was a seesaw. I went through 3 years of, please just don't cover this. Like, don't write about this team. I'm not reading it, Yeah. So, and so we did it minimally, but yeah. So I don't know, a month ago, I would have said, maybe even less than that, I would have said Ole Miss is the most disappointing team in the SEC. They're not that now, but like, they're still not where we thought they were going to be, are they?
No, I mean, so literally they went through, they've done the deal where they lost 2 games, won 2 games, got a little momentum. Everybody goes, well, here they go. And then they go to Arkansas and they just got boat raced down there. And then they went to Athens and they lost by double digits. And so everybody, including me, goes, they're done. Toast, done. And then they come back and they beat Tennessee at home. I think 51-50 or 52-50.
Great game that one was. Yeah.
And then they go to Auburn and they win in overtime. Devontae Shuler hits a game winner. Basically at the buzzer in overtime, 0.2 of a second, but whatever. And so now you look at Ole Miss and you go, okay, well, they're 5-6 in the league. They're, as of this taping, I think they're 64 in the net. They've got these handful of games left, but they're in a weird spot. And you know how this goes. And then in a COVID year where we don't know how the committee is going to look at teams, hell, I don't know whether they're in it or not. But let's just say for kicks and giggles that they beat Missouri in Oxford. And then they go to South Carolina, and they're not very good, and they beat them. And then after that, it's Mississippi State at home, I think, or it's at Missouri, then Mississippi State at home, whatever. Let's say they win the rest of their games with the exception of they lose in Columbia against Mizzou. That's going to put them at
15-9, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, 11-7 in the league.
Right.
And then so they're probably one of those teams that now they're kind of bubbly, sort of, maybe. They need Nashville to happen. And then who knows whether Nashville is going to happen. And then if Nashville happens, who knows what it's going to look like. I mean, if I'm Alabama or Missouri or Tennessee, and maybe even at that point, Arkansas and Florida, maybe even LSU at that point, I don't want to be in Nashville very long. I want to get out of there. I mean, in case I've got a COVID issue, I want to have time to sort that out. So maybe Ole Miss benefits from that. Maybe not. I don't know. If they lose to Missouri at home, I don't see a path at that point. You got to get quad one wins. Mizzou offers Ole Miss a couple of cracks at quad one wins. Man, I don't know. Ole Miss is a weird team. I mean, what they are, though, is they're consistently good on defense. They've now won 3 games in the league, Gabe, where they've held an opponent to 50 points or less. That's impressive. Mm-hmm. On the other side, they can't score. And so, I had all these people last week that were like, thought you said Ole Miss couldn't beat Auburn. And I said I didn't think Ole Miss could hold Auburn to 70 or less. And they didn't. They held them to 74 in regulation. I didn't think Romello White would go for 30 points at Auburn. I didn't think Ole Miss would score 74 points in regulation. So who knows? I mean, maybe it's a veteran team. They have some talent. They have some really good players. They haven't quit on Kermit very clearly. So who knows? Maybe they're one of these teams that finds itself late and goes on a run. And then maybe they're just one of these teams that rides the roller coaster all year long, and we'll find out.
And I mean, to be fair, a lot of teams score in the 70s and 80s against Auburn because that's the kind of style they play. The biggest indictment against Ole Miss's offense is probably scoring 61 against LSU because that's what LSU likes to give up in a half. They're not particularly interested in playing any defense. But Ole Miss, I think, is actually in a better spot than some teams. Like even then, say a Missouri, who they're probably a 3 seed if the tournament starts today. And I've got people saying, could they be a 1? Well, the problem is I look at this league, they've got 1 game left that offers a 1 game scheduled left that offers a chance at a good win. I mean, Ole Miss it's an okay win, but it's not a resume.
It'd be a quad one.
Would it be quad one? Okay, as of right now. But, they've got South Carolina, A&M, maybe Vandy. There just aren't that many chances. Missouri has a lot of big wins already, but Ole Miss does have a chance. I mean, this is kind of, like you said, this game kind of can make or break Ole Miss's season. It's a weird spot for Missouri to be in because they've been the ones trying to spoil other people's seasons rather than being able to make anyone's season. But this one's big for Ole Miss, probably bigger than it is for Missouri.
Yeah, this is one of those games where if we were living in a non-COVID time and the records and everything were exactly the same, this would be a big home game, for Ole Miss because everybody would be like, hey, we got to do our part, help, blah, blah, blah. You'd have probably the pavilion would be pretty rocking, and it would be a factor, but there's going to be 900 people there at most. Wow. At 8:00 on a Wednesday.
Is that all they're allowing this year? 10%?
They're allowing 10%. So it's a 9,000 seat, 900 people. And, by the time you put support staff and all that stuff in there, maybe it's 1,000, but it's not a factor as it's not anywhere.
Right.
So I don't know, I mean, Devontae Shuler's a really good veteran guard. Romello White's a very gifted post player. And then they have some other dudes that sometimes they show up and sometimes they don't. And when they do show up, it can be pretty good. And when they don't show up and anything goes wrong, it goes badly. At the end of the year, I suspect Ole Miss is going to look back at about 4 games. They lost at Dayton on December the 19th in a game that they had in hand briefly, and they let it get away. They had a loss against Wichita State at home in a game that they appeared to be poised to win on, I think that was January the 2nd. And then they had a week where they lost at home to Georgia, which was an inexcusable loss.
Yeah.
And they went to Florida and had a game in hand, had the game won, and let it get away in the last few minutes, kind of like Missouri almost let Alabama come back. One of those kind of games where it haunts you. And so you take those 4 games, give them 3 of those 4 games. And we're having a different conversation right now.
Right.
You know, they'd probably be in great shape for the tournament, but they got a chance. I think to do it, though, I think for this to be a pertinent conversation when you and I talk maybe next week before Ole Miss plays at Missouri, I think Ole Miss has to beat Missouri in Oxford. Simple as that.
So the problem when you play Missouri is always the problem number one is what do you do with Jeremiah Tillman? I know Ole Miss is a good defensive team. They play a million different defenses throughout a game. What's the primary approach trying to stop a 6'10" guy that I think is probably first team All SEC at this point?
Well, I'll be curious to see, as we tape this, I don't know the answer to this, whether Hadim C is available. Romello White's been a really good defender. He's been a rim protector for Ole Miss, especially here late. They've gotten some positive minutes out of Sammy Hunter, a young, I guess he's a sophomore. In this COVID thing, you don't know who's or what.
Right. They're all just players that are never leaving.
Yeah, but Hunter's a good player, getting better. If they have C, he's a guy who he can give you 20 good minutes, and he has 5 fouls to give, and they can bang on Tillman and make him work. And like you said, they're going to throw a lot of different defensive looks at Missouri, like they throw at everybody. And I think the bigger issue for Ole Miss against Missouri, don't get me wrong, he's terrific, but the bigger issue is keeping guards in front of them. Mm-hmm. It's not letting those guys get that dribble penetration that leads to a dish and a dunk and a foul and that kind of thing. It's being able to guard on the perimeter. They've not been consistent with that at times because they play Jarkel Joyner a lot at the 2, and Jarkel brings offense, but sometimes you sacrifice defense to get that offense. And Schuler's a good defender. KJ Buffin can be a good defender when he wants to be. He's been in the doghouse for about a week and a half now. I don't know how much he's going to play or if he'll play. I mentioned Robert Allen. They play Austin Crowley some. They play Matthew Morrell some. They're searching for this other guy. Now, Luis Rodriguez plays a good bit, is a really good defender, probably one of the more underrated defensive players in the league, not giving them what they want offensively, but it's an Ole Miss team that can stop people. I mean, if you told me Ole Miss holds Missouri to 65 points, I believe it. I mean, then the question comes, well, can they score 65? Right. They don't shoot particularly well. They've got to be very efficient on the offensive end, and they've not done that consistently, and that's why they are where they are today.
So I don't know if this is as simple as this, but, Conzo's teams have a reputation for playing very much the way Ole Miss does this year. But this year, they're fast. Like, they made an intentional decision. Hey, pick up the pace, run when you can. We have guys who can score. So is it as simple as the team that controls a game above 65 or 70 Missouri wins, and a game 65 or below Ole Miss has a much better chance to win?
On some level, I mean, this team sometimes likes to play fast because sometimes playing fast leads to turnovers, and turnovers lead to easy buckets in transition and lead to easy points. And a team that normally struggles to score 62 suddenly gets 74, right, and you win. So I don't know. I mean, look, I think Kwanzaa's done a great job. I mean, I think he's SEC Coach of the Year, unless the bottom just falls out here in the last few weeks. I've watched them play. Missouri's very good. I think they're the second best team in the SEC. But they're fallible. I mean, I've never once watched them, or frankly anyone in the league, and thought, boy, that team, they can't get beat. I mean, they're loaded. You can beat Missouri. You got to play really well, and you've got to you can't turn the ball over a lot. And in fairness to this Ole Miss team, they don't typically turn it over much. Man, their problem, Gabe, is they just don't make shots. I mean, it's they create shots, they don't make them.
We spend all this time breaking down these games and put the ball in the basket, you're pretty good. Don't put the ball in the basket, it's kind of hard to win. Yeah, and so like when Romello White plays the way that he played the other day, where he's setting really good screens and he's a weapon in the pick and pop. When Jarkel Joyner's making sure his mid-range jumper that he typically makes, and when Devontae Schuler plays up to his ability, which is as an all SEC caliber guard,
when they do that, they're good. When any one of those things falls off, they're not so good.
Yeah. So look, my main problem is that this is an 8 o'clock tip off, and that means
I know
12:30, and I don't know, man. We're old for this.
I'm old for this. I see 8 o'clock, and literally I start spending the day before thinking, okay, how do I squeeze in a nap?
When do I get a nap?
Yeah. What do I do? Because I also know that alarm's going to go off Thursday morning, and it's going to be, damn it.
Yeah.
You're so tired that day. I don't like these late games, and I get that they're made for TV, but we ought to have some power over this. I mean, I don't understand. Seriously, I don't understand why an 8 o'clock game can't be a 7:30 game.
Yeah, well, because the 6 o'clock game doesn't actually end till 8:40, so you already missed the first half of that on TV. You know, I've pushed for 8 a.m. kickoffs during football season. No one has listened to me yet.
No one will ever understand how much writers love 11 a.m. kickoffs. You get an 11 a.m. kickoff. When you see that news pop on Monday, you get this warm, fuzzy feeling.
It is 100% the biggest disconnect between us and fans, right? Because fans hate that, and we love that, and we aren't self-aware enough to realize that they get really mad every time we talk about how much we love it. But
if the shoe were ever on the other foot, they would completely understand. Right. I mean, and I get why you want games. If you're a fan, you want a game at night. I get it completely. It still doesn't change the fact that I get unbridled joy from an 11 a.m. game, because that means, unless from a writing standpoint, I mean, now that we're doing shows and stuff, I mean, 11 a.m. means we don't go off the quote air till 7 or 8 that night, but I'm done writing at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And that's great. And those late games I remember covering a game in Tuscaloosa. It was 2015. Ole Miss actually beat Alabama there. And it was a game that kicked at 8-18 or some crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. And I remember being down on the field in the fourth quarter, and I looked at my watch, and it was past midnight, and I was like, oh my God, we're not done, and it's already Sunday. And you realize, I mean, we were driving back. You realize, your life, and it was hot, and we had to walk a gazillion miles. And I remember thinking, this is the part when people think we have glamorous lives. And when I used to think this would be a glamorous job, this is the stuff that nobody ever told you about, was walking back to your car in Tuscaloosa at 2:45 in the morning with 97% humidity, knowing you still had to drive a little over 3 hours to get home. There's nothing pleasant about that.
So full disclosure, this is being taped Tuesday afternoon. I can't see the comments, but I know the comments are already telling us to quit whining. So we'll just wrap it up at this point, and Missouri and Ole Miss play later tonight, and we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Thanks, Neil.
All right. Thanks, Gabe.
All right. Neil McCready, rebelgrove.com, does a great job covering Ole Miss, and you guys can check out his stuff. I always like catching up with him. I do the Greatest Pod in the South with him and Jay Tate, and we talk multiple times a week. So wanted to bring him on the show and give you his perspective on the Rebels. So real quick before we jump to Mitchell 40 in a couple minutes, Case is asking, if you had a straight-up bet for Mizzou to make the Sweet 16, would you take it? So this is a good time for me to get on two separate soapboxes. First of all, I don't like during the regular season calling a team a Final Four team, an Elite Eight team, a Sweet 16 team, because I haven't seen the matchups, right? Who's Missouri playing in the first two games? So we assume that they're going to be a 3 or 4 seed, which means they play a 13 or 14 in round one. They should win that game, right? Shouldn't be there are upsets, but they should win that game. So round two is going to be a 5 or a 6. Well, that's kind of a toss-up. I mean, you're splitting hairs between like the 12th best team in the country and the 24th best team in the country. So, or the 21st best team in the country. So that's a toss-up. Also, what if the team on the other side gets upset? And what if Missouri is then playing an 11 seed in round two rather than a 6 seed? And 1 6 seed, Missouri might match up really well with, whereas another 6 seed, they might not match up well at all with. So that's soapbox number one. Soapbox number two is actually bigger than for me. This is a big thing for me, and I'm very passionate about it. college basketball, and I know it's not going to change. Like me talking on this little YouTube show is not going to change anyone's mind. And I'm fully aware of that. But college basketball is judged way, way, way too much on March. In 2002, Missouri started the season 4th in the country, I think, or got as high as 4th in the country. Fell apart. Total collapse. Ended up the last at-large team in the tournament, 12 seed. They beat Ohio State, I think Cincinnati, which had beaten UCLA. I forget who the 8 seed who had beaten UCLA was, but somebody. And then Miami. Got to the Elite Eight. They didn't really beat a great team. They won 3 games at the right time. Lost to OU in the regional final. And everybody looks back on that. Oh, we got to the Elite Eight. What a great season. No, 2002 was a trash season. It was this great Missouri team that did nothing all year long, that limped into the NCAA tournament, got a couple of favorable matchups, and won 3 games at the right time. So then go to 2012, 11-12 team. They went 31-4 in the regular season, I think. They just blitzed people in the Guardians Classic. They should have won the Big 12 if not for a terrible non-call on Thomas Robinson and Allen Fieldhouse. They ran through the Big 12 tournament and won it on the way out the door. They were 2 seed. They lost to Norfolk. Most people look back and go, well, that was a bad season. No, that was a phenomenal season with a bad ending. So, Case, I understand your question. Is Missouri a Sweet 16 team? I have no idea. Are they good enough to make the Sweet 16? Absolutely. They're good enough to make the Final Four if they play well 4 straight days and they get the right matchups and all that. Absolutely, they're good enough to make the Final Four. Doesn't mean they will. Could lose in round 2. Could lose in round 1. Baylor and Gonzaga should be in the Final Four. It'll be a little disappointing if they aren't. Other than that, there's 20 teams that can make it. So, yeah, is Missouri Sweet 16 caliber? 100%. Should we judge this season on that? Negative 600%. I know everyone will. I know that's what college basketball is. I hate it. I will never stop hating it. It's just kind of how it goes. And now, with that, we're going to bring Mitchell Forty into the picture. Mitch, hey, we're talking about Ole Miss. They play tonight, I've heard. Tip-off in about 20 minutes.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I'm repeating things that have been said, but it's, maybe a little bit more tighter for a matchup than the rankings and records would have you believe. I think this reminds me a little bit of Auburn, where at a minimum I expect it to be a tight game.
Yeah. I mean, Ole Miss has been playing better lately. We were talking earlier, a little bit surprised to see Ole Miss being the favorite in this game, because I look at this and I view it as a game Missouri could lose, but I kind of feel like should win.
Yeah, I agree. For one, I'm a little surprised they're the favorite. Ole Miss is the favorite just because I really don't think home road makes this big of a difference this season. And, you're telling me, maybe it's like a 2-point difference this season versus a neutral site. So something like, Mizzou would only be favored by like 2.5 or something like that at Mizzou Arena. That seems low to me. And also, I mean, like Ole Miss has won a couple of good games in a row. They've also won both by 2 points. And Auburn's not quite, the level it has been. So, I mean, they're a challenge. They're a tough matchup in some ways. They do some things, well, that Missouri has struggled with. But I certainly think Missouri is the better team, and I would pick them to win, probably 6 or 7 times out of 10 if these two teams played that many.
Yeah. And I can't remember, as Hadim C is not playing tonight. Yeah. We've seen he's basically Ole Miss's only big guy. Now, Ole Miss plays a lot of zone, but I don't know. This is a game to me, nobody over 6'8". Like Jeremiah Tillman should play well. If Jeremiah Tillman plays well, Missouri wins, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And if for some reason, if he doesn't put up big numbers, it needs to be because Ole Miss committed to, stopping him and let other guys, kind of make plays. It needs to not be because, he kind of took himself out of the game for whatever reason, be it foul trouble, lack of aggression, whatever, which hasn't really been a problem with him lately. So I agree. I think this sets up well for him to have a big night.
Yeah, because even the last couple of games where he hasn't had big numbers, I thought he's played well. He's been a factor in the game. It hasn't been like he was just invisible like we so often saw in the first 3 years.
For sure. Yeah. I think, down the stretch against Alabama was kind of the only time in recent memory, probably maybe since the calendar turned to 2021, that I could think of where he was, maybe not as much of a factor as he should have been. And I'm sure that coaches, brought that to his attention here in the past few days.
Right. And Javon Pickett, I we don't know. He might play.
Yeah.
He might not play. We have no idea.
No, yeah, he'll be, he's there. I'm sure he's available, but again, we shall on Saturday. That doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot, so it's just going to be, we'll see. I'm sure the starting lineups may even be out now. I'll check, but if not, they should be out soon. So that would be, sort of a okay. There we go. No Javon Pickett in the starting lineup. It's Mark Smith in his place. So at a minimum, he's not starting.
Right, which still obviously doesn't necessarily mean he's not playing. Just that he's not starting.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
so we were
correct.
talking a little bit earlier. Ole Miss is, Devontae Shuler's kind of the guy. I was saying I'll be interested to see what Missouri does on him defensively. Like I would think Drew Smith, but when you put Drew Smith on the other team's best player, he tends to sometimes get in foul trouble. So I think we might see a little more Pinson and Mark Smith on him.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I will say I felt like against Sharif Cooper they started. Now he's a different player than Devontae Shuler, but they started with Xavier.
First
Pinson,
of all, in that he's only been
really
in
work.
school for 2 months and not 8 years. So
Right. Yes, that's true. But yeah, I mean, they started with Pinson, it didn't work, and they kind of had to go with Drew Smith the majority of the time. They actually threw some Pickett out there as well on him. So, if he were available, that is a possibility. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I would guess they'll start off with Pinson on him again, and kind of see what happens. Probably, mix it up, throw some different looks at him. But he's kind of the thing that the piece that makes them go, and he does it a lot by getting into the lane and scoring around the rim, getting to the free throw line. He's an okay 3-point shooter. I think he's like 33%, but the vast majority of his buckets are coming from inside the arc. So, it's going to be all about staying in front of him.
yeah, Phoenix Night Flame is asking, didn't Konzo say that Pickett would play this morning? If he did, I didn't see it, but he said he was going to play last game, and he played 22 seconds. So Konzo saying a guy is going to play means less than nothing to me at this point. And that's how he deals with injuries. Everybody's going to play until suddenly you get to the game and he doesn't play. So, I think I'll be interested to see not only this one, but I think LSU's at Mississippi State tonight. And I think those are a couple of the games that kind of, if you're going to finish in the top 4 in this league, if you're going to separate from the other teams in that group, these are the type of games you win. LSU at Mississippi State, Missouri at Ole Miss. So I think Tennessee's currently beating up on Georgia at home, but those teams along with Arkansas and Florida, if Florida ever plays again, are kind of in that mix.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And it's not a must win by any means. It's not like there's, it's a disaster if they don't. Missouri does have a little, 1-game cushion on those other teams you mentioned. So, and their schedule is relatively favorable down the stretch. So I think they can still get a top 4 seed in the SEC if they lose. But, it's just one of those things where, the talk now is about, getting a high seed, a 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, maybe finishing second, contending for first in the SEC. Certainly, if those things are going to be at all realistic, you would expect them to win tonight.
And this is their toughest game until the regular season finale, right? Or the regular season finale as of now against Florida.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Arkansas is playing okay, but that's at home, and you already beat them once. I think this is probably the second toughest game left on the schedule behind going to Florida. Even if they make up the LSU game, I guess that's probably similar. LSU at home versus Ole Miss at Ole Miss. But yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, and I like you were saying with the home road thing. I mean, yeah, you're at Florida and whatever, but there's no home court advantage this year. It doesn't exist. T-Rise is curious if you have Bob Douglas locked in your basement. I want to be clear, like you don't have a basement, right? That's not a
No,
thing
I
that
don't.
could
I
happen.
live in an
Okay.
apartment.
Okay.
Also, like, I feel like we should be more concerned about the opposite happening if I ever go missing than Bob Douglas missing going to these web shows. He's not paid to be on here, and I'm less interested in keeping him in my basement. That doesn't exist.
This is a fair point. Ted Stepanovich joining the chat, loves the show with his kids. I'm impressed, man. Like we've got kids watching the show. I think we had teenagers commenting earlier. Like this is a worldwide sensation, man. I mean,
yeah, we're reaching all demographics.
Yeah,
we're influencers.
So big deal. Yeah, I don't know. Tip off in about 10 minutes on SEC Network. Theoretically, I think the 6:00 game on SEC Network was canceled, so we might actually see the beginning of this one for the first time all year.
That would be
a big
good.
day.
Maybe they don't have to bump tip back to like 8:11. That would be that.
Right.
Those 11 minutes do make a big difference in my quality of life.
Or have to go to ESPN News or one of the Ocho or whatever. All right, before we let you go, Tucker Daniels is asking for score predictions tonight. So I don't know if you want to change your mind from when you wrote it this morning, but what are you picking?
I mean, I don't. Nothing's happened to really make me change my mind. I'll say this. I think it's gonna be a good game. I think it's gonna be a close game. I would not be surprised if Missouri lost, but at this point, I mean, I'm not picking them to lose a close game. I mean, they just keep winning them. So I think I actually can't remember for sure. I think I picked Missouri like 64-61. I think it's going to be somewhat low scoring. It was, if not that exactly, it was right around there. Missouri by 3.
I want to pick Missouri by like 7, but Missouri doesn't win by 7. They only play games 5 or less. So I'm going to pick Missouri by 5, 72-67. And I think if Missouri gets to 70, they win this game. Because Ole Miss has problems getting to 70. So, all right. Well, we'll let you go do your thing and take care of the site and the message board for a little while, and then we'll finish up and we'll see you on another Zoom call later on.
Sounds good.
All right, Mitchell Forty will have coverage for us on the message board, on Power Mizzou, all that throughout the evening while the game is going on. When this is over, just to kind of reset for those of you who maybe don't tune in for every show, but basically what we're gonna do, we got 6 minutes till tip off. We'll take you up right up till about 8:00, and then when I sign off, Mitchell will cover the game on the message board. He'll chat with you guys during, and then we will jump on Conzo Martin's post game call, which sometime after 10:00. We don't know exactly, obviously, because it depends on how long the game lasts and how long it takes Conzo to get done with the radio and do his thing. But sometime shortly after 10, we'll have a Zoom call with Conzo. As soon as that's over, I will jump back on here on this channel. I will upload Conzo's video, and we will start the post-game show. We'll play that at the beginning, then we'll take your calls, comments, questions, all that. So what you need to do to know when that's going on is you need to subscribe to our channel, which will allow you to get alerts when we go live. Because, again, we hope to be live at 10:30. Could be 10 minutes before, could be 10 minutes after. We shall see. But if you subscribe to the channel, you will get an alert. Bob Douglas shows up in the chat, and we certainly appreciate that. The super chat to send Mitchell to Buffalo to be Bob's +1 at a wedding. Look, I'm just going to be honest, guys. If you don't watch every show, sometimes you miss things. You might think this is a little bit weird, but this is very normal for the Baseline View. This is what we do. Bob contributes about $5 a show. Within 2 years, he will be able to afford a plane ticket to Buffalo for Mitchell to attend a wedding with him. Now, it may be, I don't know if that wedding's happening in the next 2 years. Mitch may miss it. But at least Bob will have a trip to Buffalo for other reasons with Mitch. They could just go to Niagara Falls and ride the Maid of the Mist, whatever. But Bob, certainly appreciate you seriously chipping in. Like, we have fun, but appreciate you tossing us a little just kind of hat tip to what we do here, and appreciate everybody who watches and contributes and does whatever you want to do, shares the show, likes the show, all that. Thanks for everybody who does that. Okay, Phoenix giving us some Royals news. Oh, hey, former Arkansas Razorbacks outfielder Andrew Benintendi going to the Royals. So that's good news. I'm happy with that. Steve is picking Mizzou 77-68. I could see something somewhere in that range for sure. Mike Benning letting everybody know that the SEC network is currently showing Texas A&M South Carolina volleyball. I got to be honest, guys. Like, if that's not over, I feel like they need to cut away to the Missouri Ole Miss basketball game. I don't know if they will. I just feel like that's a thing that should happen. So Mizzou Ole Miss coming up. Tip-off, I don't know exactly. 8:00 something. It's going to be somewhere between 3 and 10 minutes from now. Tigers and the Rebels in Oxford. They'll play again in just like a week and a half, I think, in Columbia. So first of two meetings between these teams. Missouri is second in the SEC, trying to hold on to that. And Mike Benning updates us that the volleyball match just ended. So Mizzou and Ole Miss will tip off on time. Ole Miss 10-8 on the season, 5-6 in the league. Really kind of needs this one. For NCAA tournament hopes. And I want to leave you with this. We've had it up on the screen a few times, but this was shocking to me when I was looking at stuff and getting ready for this show. Ole Miss leads this series 13-3. They had never played before Mizzou joined the SEC. And Ole Miss has won 13 out of 16 matchups. They've averaged 2 games a year because they've played a few times in the SEC tournament. So there have been a couple years with 3 games, a couple years with only 1. But they've averaged 2 games a year. Ole Miss, 13 wins. Missouri's only won 3 of them. One of them was last year. They split at home. I'm not sure Missouri's won in Oxford. I didn't look that part up. But certainly Ole Miss has dominated this series, and it will be interesting to see what Missouri manages to get done tonight. So appreciate you guys hanging out with us pregame. We do this for an hour before every Mizzou game. Hope you enjoyed hearing from Neil McCready, Jeremiah Tillman. Thanks to Mitch for joining us for a few minutes. So appreciate everybody for being here. Go watch the game. Have fun. Hang out on the message boards. We'll see you here in a couple hours with the Burger Smokehouse Dance Class postgame show. Until then, talk to you later.